Entertainment in Afghanistan.
Competitive kite flying was one of Afghanistan's favorite pastimes until...
No kite flying. I cut your kite string.
The Taliban started banning absolutely everything. Other activities they banned included pigeon flying.
Take these broken wings and learn to fly.
No pigeons
All
flying.
your life.
Movies.
No movies. None. Forget about it.
And the strategic game of chess. These extremist forces still maintain significant control despite the tribal resistance and their fiercely independent nature.
Entertainment in Pakistan.
Field hockey is the national sport, but cricket holds greater popularity and better captivates the attention of Pakistan's people. Sporting events are typically held during weekends and holidays in order to draw larger crowds. Unfortunately, some of these raucous games fall victim to naked dudes streaking. Wince here. In Kabaddi, teams occupy each side of a playing field. A player, or raider, is sent to the opposite side's team to wrestle or tag the opponent, all while holding their breath.
Afghanistan's current political chapter was born out of the tragedy that happened on September 11, 2001, when two passenger aircrafts were purposely flown into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon by hijackers. The attacks were linked to Osama bin Laden as well as Al-Qaeda. In October of 2001, the United States launched a military operation into Afghanistan. Their goals were to overthrow the current governing body, the Taliban, as well as destroy the Al-Qaeda training camps. Operation Enduring Freedom was not isolated to the Afghan area, however, it was its primary focus. In November of the same year, the United Nations hosted an emergency conference in Bonn, Germany, to outline a rough agreement that would transfer the power of Afghanistan back to the displaced Afghan refugees. There were many safeguards and provisions in the agreement that carefully preserved what the UN believed should be a politically neutral environment to allow a rational framing of the new Afghan constitution. At the same time, the United Nations authorized the use of NATO troops to support Hamid Karzai, the interim president, in rebuilding the infrastructure of Afghanistan. The official transfer of power was made on December 22, 2001. The official Afghan constitution was adopted in January of 2004, the first free presidential elections since the re-establishment of the Afghan people took place soon after on October 9, 2004. Hamid Karzai won the reappointment to the office he took care of in the interim. Leading up to the election, Karzai's opponents threatened to boycott the election, citing corruption and election manipulation as the instigation. There were reports that the identifications used to validate a person's right to vote were being handed out freely. Despite all that, Karzai's closest rivals rescinded their boycott, and those elected took their respective positions in the government. The structure of government itself involves a judicial, executive, and legislative branch. Parliament is mandated to have at least 25% female representation. In the 2005 parliamentary elections, 28% of those elected were female. This places Afghanistan as a world leader in female representation in government. The 2009 Afghanistan presidential elections are coming soon, and there is already controversy when a source reported that U.S. Embassy in Kabul has been pressuring presidential favorites to drop out of the race in order to smooth the way for Ali Ahmad Jahlai, a United States citizen, to win. This would be against the Afghan constitution, and Jahlai would have to apply for and receive citizenship before he could run. A lot of international pressure from special interest groups as well as the UN originate from the fact that the current Afghan constitution, while it makes many modern-day strides in law as well as individual rights, still holds cultural beliefs and traditions sacred. The Constitution allows religious freedom, but does not isolate itself from the teachings of Islam. Afghanistan has one of the largest bodies of women serving in government, but is still criticized over the human rights issues as it pertains to them. Corruption is reported to be rampant in all corners of their government. Those who were once tribal leaders are now heads of state, and those who were once local warlords are now generals. Some argue that the new framing of the government is only legitimatizing the corruption that was already there. Others feel that outside powers like the United States are attempting to arrogantly pull the important political strings beyond mere diplomacy. Is it the fault of the international community to not be more tolerant of cultural differences and traditions? Or is it the fault of the Afghan government, and by extension the people, for not adapting to the rest of the world's moral barometer? Does the UN or the US as a whole feel that cooperation is owed to them by Afghanistan as repayment? Or do they want a truly independent country with an independent voice to first find itself and then attempt to join the rest of the world? Is it disingenuous to the Afghan people to go to great lengths to have set up a mirror of Western democracy only to push aside its rules and laws when it's no longer convenient for us? The Afghan people need to find their voice, and we need to learn to respect it.
Afghanistan was the world's largest producer of raw opium in 1999 and 2000. In 2000, the Taliban banned opium poppy cultivation but failed to destroy the existing stockpile and presumably benefited substantially from resulting price increases. Later, in 2001, the Taliban reportedly announced that poppy cultivation could resume. Much of Afghanistan's opium production is refined into heroin and is either consumed by a growing South Asian addict population or exported, primarily to Europe. In 2002 and 2003, income from opium reached $4.8 billion, according to the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, nearly twice that of income from international aid projects. U.S. military commanders have sharpened their focus on the opium poppy trade, which produces 75% of the world's opium, and plan to target militia commanders who profit from trafficking. The approach is a shift for the Pentagon, which has been hesitant to involve the U.S. military in drug enforcement efforts because its main mission is to combat terrorism. Currently, the standing order to ground troops is to destroy drugs only when encountering them during military operations, and not to take initiative on their own against drug warehouses or laboratories. U.S. soldiers routinely have let drugs full of poppies pass on the road once it was clear they weren't transporting Al-Qaeda. As the Bush administration hailed Afghanistan as a major foreign policy success, the country's soaring drug profits now equal about half of its gross national product and have become the principal source of funds for reconstruction, outpacing foreign aid. The drug trade also is fueling corruption at the highest levels of the government, involving army generals and other top officials who routinely work with the U.S. military on anti-terrorism operations. I am increasingly worried that the whole economy, the whole social fabric, is going to be dominated by the drug question, said Antonio Maria Costa, Executive Director of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. Just like people can be addicted to drugs, countries can be addicted to a drug economy. That's what I'm seeing in Afghanistan. Drugs are currency in Afghanistan and border areas of Pakistan. Farmers, traders, and ordinary people keep drugs in their homes rather than money in the bank. Today we are in a war situation, so what do people do?